Hello, everyone, and welcome to the quick recap of round 7 of the Sinquefield Cup. Let's have a quick look at the results before we begin with the games. There were two decisive results between Alireza and Dingleren, and the second one between Abdusattarov Nodirbek versus So Wesley. So, going to the games, the game between Alireza and Dingleren started with the Italian. This has been kind of the flavor of the month, we can say. The Italian G5 variation being very, very tropical. So what happened here was there was a lot of maneuvering. Uh, at one moment, it felt like Ding Liren might opt to go for f5, and Alireza probably thought that he was always prepared for it with his rook in front of the queen and ready to capture ef5 and play d4. But f5 was never really played, and Ding continued with knight d8 and f6. Again, there was a lot of maneuvering, the knight going from f1 to e3, and the bishops maneuvered between a2 and b1 and c2 and g6 and so on. And what happened in the meantime is that the clock started showing. So Ding Liren, being not in the form that he was used to be earlier, fell short of time. At this point, you can already see he's got 8 minutes, whereas Alireza has got 38. And there is some pressure on black. Alireza was always keen on putting his knight to f5, but he was waiting for his time. He was just moving the pieces around and putting pressure. And ding, what happened was a couple of moves later, right here, he succumbed to the pressure. With around 3 minutes on the clock, Ding Liren played e takes d4, cd4, and d5, probably thinking that he might be able to simplify over here. But a simple point was missed. E d5, cd5, and after these captures, Alireza just simply won the pawn on a5. And not only that, with the bishop attacked over here with the queen, next to fall is the d5 pawn. So in a span of a couple of moves, Ding Liren just lost two of his pawns. And with a clear advantage on time, Alireza never really gave any chance to Ding to fight back. It was pretty ruthless and comfortably finished off the game. At this point, Ding Liren resigned. The second game that we are having a look at today, Nodirbek versus Wesley So, is also about weak pawns. The game started with the Nimzo Indian defense, sort of Rubinstein, or you can say the Hübner variation, both sides capturing on c5 and c4, knight g3, b6. Okay, so black sacrifices another pawn over here. He is ready to give up cb6 and sometimes even ba7. For example, if white takes c takes b6, there is an idea that black supports the c4 pawn with bishop a6 rather than recapture on b6 in some cases, and allows white to take ba7 as well. Of course, you can see that black pieces are quickly taking up important posts and black has already castled, so we'll definitely get a lot of compensation for that. So what happened in the game was bishop c4, and at this point, So Wesley played a very interesting move, h5. It's very typical against a knight placed on g3 or g6 to push the rook pawn and push the knight to an inactive square. But over here, the knight gets pushed right in the center, so it was not much of a problem for white. After h4, white went knight g e4. After the captures, black played knight f6, and at this point, So Wesley played queen b6, which was not a great move, and Alireza quickly took over, taking over the advantage with queen a4, forcing black to take bishop d2, rook d2. And now we can see the weak pawns that are going to be in trouble. Black already has isolated pawns on a7 and c5, and he has pushed his pawn to h4, so which is going to need support sooner or later, probably with g5. So Alireza very rightly judged this position as clearly better for him. Sorry, Nodirbek correctly judged this position as clearly better for him. And here he played rook c2. So he's not really interested in exchanges and he goes after the c pawn. And at the same time. This bishop move, particularly, I think queen b7 was a mistake from black. Of course, we can see the evaluation bar telling us so, but it's very clear that so Wesley missed something. He probably saw a couple of moves ahead. It was not like he just missed that there's going to be a double attack after he plays queen b7 and bishop e2. But a couple of moves ahead, when he was looking for counterplay, that is the position that was judged much better by Nodirbek. So he played bishop e2 over here, and so Wesley played queen e4. The idea being that after queen e4, the knight will come out to support c5, and the pressure on h4 will also be diluted. But Nodirbek continued accurately with rook c4, then brought his other rook to c1, targeting c5 rather than winning the h4 pawn, because if he would have captured on h4, then black would have played rook d2 and got a lot of play for it. So instead, Nodirbek played rook a c1 and took the pawn on c5 and just dropped his rook back to defend the second rank. So black played rook f d8, and this was an important moment. The idea from So Wesley was that he continues to have some compensation because of his rook placed on the 7th rank, but very smartly on the next move itself, Nodirbek questions that rook and forces it to leave its strong place, or else at least remove the important threats. The move was queen a5, targeting the rook on d8. The idea is that black cannot take on c2, because after queen takes d8 check king h7, white would recapture on c2 and bishop d3 would be a winning fork. Therefore, black couldn't do much. He either had to move his d2 rook or play knight e4. Knight e4 was what he did. Of course, he's also threatening on f2, so white played bishop f3. Once again trying to question the stability of this d2 rook. But remember that he cannot really take on e4 because of queen f2. So Wesley played rook d8 to d6. Then there was queen b4, targeting the e4 knight and forcing the exchanges of the rook. Now there wasn't much for black to play. The remaining part was just a matter of technique. After the captures, Nodirbek was quite accurate though. He took the pawns with the right checks, and at this point he played queen d4, targeting the h4 pawn. So Wesley played king g8 to avoid losing it with a check, but the smart thing that Nodirbek did was queen d8 check and queen takes h4, because when black takes on b2, white has queen d4 check, simplifying and completely winning. So this was the second decisive game, once again lost because of weak pawns. The next game that we are going to have a look at is played between Fabiano Caruana and Gukesh. So this one was also sort of Italian, but Gukesh answered with the two knights instead of playing bishop c5. Gukesh went for knight f6. The structure was quite similar to the Alireza game, as black played h6 and g5, but the placement of the bishop was different. Neither is white bishop placed on g3, and nor is the black bishop placed on this diagonal a7 g1, as was in the case of the Alireza game. So here Gukesh develops his bishop to g7 and played b5, knight a5. b5 was a move that was a little bit questionable. Maybe black could have played directly knight a5 to try and exchange off this bishop, which may have b5 may have given white a slight advantage. Then there was knight a5, knight e3, again knight f5, takes g4, right? Knight d2, c4. Okay, so kind of dynamic play was going on between Fabi and Gukesh, and that led eventually to some weak pawns on both sides of the board, with black having extended a little bit on the king side, knowing for fact that he might have to take his king short castling in any case. But after the queen exchange, things were looking a little bit better for Gukesh, better in the sense that better than before. The dangers seemed to have been gone away, and f4, h5. So you can see there was a lot of fighting chess. It was not like it was a dry draw. Both sides trying to attack the weaknesses of the other side. I'll take you to the position which was an important one rather than discuss all the details in between. So let's get to the important point. This was the moment. Slowly we are getting to the important point. Knight d3. You can see targeting of weaknesses going on over here, and you can see the time control as well over here. Both sides are having less than around 5 minutes or so. and both sides maneuvering, trying to create some play. The position was okay, and Gukesh could have just kept moving the bishop around. It wasn't really a problem, but at this moment, uh, probably due to time pressure, he messed up and he played rook g7. Fabiano had one chance over here, and that was to take rook takes f6. So rook f6 was the move that could have given white an advantage, mainly because after black captures the rook, white can take bishop takes e5. After rook takes f6, rook takes f6, white can go bishop takes e5. Even if the bishop is pinned by rook e6, white has got a nice tempo, knight c5, attacking the black rook, supporting his own rook and removing the bishop from a pin. So he wins material. But this was missed, uh, is understandable due to time pressure. And after knight takes c3, Mukesh quickly simplified the position with these exchanges, went into a double rook endgame, and okay, there was still a fight left. Uh, Fabi tried for a while, but there wasn't much, and Gukesh was able to just hold the game. So let's just finish this. This was we're coming to the final checks, and this was the final position of the game. The next game was between Prag and Jan Nepomniachtchi. So it started with the Petrov. We kind of saw some sort of world championship preparation over here from Jan. In the typical bishop d3, bishop d6 variation of the Petrov, this is the typical position where normally black plays bishop f5 after rook e1, but Jan played bishop g4, sacrificing a pawn immediately right away. Prag could have thought about bishop e4, d4, and rook e4 over here. The expected variation would have gone with f5 and rook e6 in order to keep the bishop under check to avoid black from playing queen h4 after taking on the knight on f3 and so on. But this position would still have some compensation for black. So what Prag did was, instead of playing bishop takes e4 here, he first played h3, and after the bishop went back to h5, this is the moment when he captured the pawn to try to avoid the typical ideas. Having h3 played means that black doesn't have an immediate target on h2 in some cases, so white might not lose or give back the pawn immediately. But the position gives quite a bit of compensation to black, and it was evident from the moves that Prag played soon. Mainly the bishop on c1 could not develop very easily, and the pin was the factor over here. Prag tried to get rid of the pin with queen d3, trying to get the knight out of way, but Jan was always ready for it. Immediately played knight c5. You can see the clock. He's not even had time to think at all. It looks like it's all preparation. After knight c5, Prag played queen c2. Black did not take this knight because dc5 attacks both the bishops, so black would have to sacrifice a piece after bishop c5, gf3. But if black tries to attack with queen h4, white has got bishop e3 and the sacrifice of the piece. It's not enough. So instead, at this point, after queen d3, knight c5, Prag went queen c2, and yes, black returned with knight d7. There was queen d3 again, knight c5, queen c2, and a repetition that led to a draw. Okay, now let's move on to the last game. So the last game was between MVL and Anish Giri. It started with Berlin, and there was a wait to see if MVL is going to break his streak of draws. It is, as far as I know, it's probably his 26th draw in a row, a record-breaking number of draws. And the Berlin is brought up over here. Not much happened in this game. Actually, it was a dry game, so I'm not going to focus much on it. We'll just have a quick look. The main try for white in the Berlin is, of course, rolling his kingside majority. But unfortunately for MVL, he could never really get his kingside rolling. There was a little bit of maneuvering, and black had played some move like rook a5, which looked quite interesting. It looked like there might be some complications after e6, but very soon the game just simplified. Black with the double bishops having compensation enough to just simplify the game. The rook was brought back into the game quickly with rook f5, a little bit of maneuvering here and there. But as I said, the two bishops are enough compensation for the pawn structure defect, and very soon the game reached an opposite colored bishop's endgame, and this ended in a draw. So two decisive games, could have been a third one. Not as interesting as the previous round, but still we are looking forward to the next one. Let's look at the standings after the seventh round to just see what we are going to look forward to. So Alireza is having a full point lead now at 5 points. Fabi just 1 point behind at four. And Alireza, when he was asked later about his game today, he said he wanted to try with white since Ding is not in great form, and he felt that Fabi could anytime try to catch up with some sudden victories. So we can see Fabi is just following Alireza 1 point behind, and Wesley So, and along with him there are around 5 players on 3.5, and so on. So looking forward to the next round. So what we are looking at round number 8 is these are the pairings. Prag will play against Fabi, Ian Nepomiashi versus Alireza, Dingliren versus Abdusattarov, so Wesley versus MVL, and Anish Giri versus Kukesh. So looking forward to the next one. This summary was basically just to have a quick look at if any game is of interest to us, and you can focus and you can look at the commentary by Swidler, by Sairawan, and Nazi on the St. Louis Chess Club YouTube channel. The commentary is really worth watching. I like the commentary of Peter Swidler a lot. And this is just a summary to give you an idea which games are going with which openings, and you may focus on whichever one you think is worthwhile.